Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of AMA with LCJ. I must say, it has been insane, and I'm looking behind me. I was like, I thought I closed that closet, but it's all good. Welcome. I'm super excited to have you joining me today. Um, man, I must say first off, I got to start here. Um, I decided to change up the music just a little bit, and it's called Sunday Coffee by Rebecca Mardall, and that thing there was vibing. I almost like lost myself there for a minute. But thank you so much for joining me for another episode of AMA with LCJ. I'm excited to be here with you all on every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. It's an opportunity for us to get together, to talk, to chat, to discuss all the things around performance, culture, diversity and inclusion. You name it, you ask it, I'll answer. That's how it goes. So really excited to kind of hop in and get started. We have some great questions carried over even from last week, so that's where we're gonna start. And I just realized music's still bumming back. It's still bumping back here, so I'm gonna turn that off. Go ahead and pause that. So what I don't want to do is actually start today without acknowledging just all the things that are going on in the world, particularly in Israel right now, in the Israel-Palestinian conflict, because I do not believe in going into things as business as usual. For some people, it's not business as usual. And I even know people here in the US who have, church family pastors, people who they know who are over there, American citizens. And so I think it's important just to take that moment and just um, for me definitely been praying and believing for everybody to come home safe, for those who are there. I could not imagine, and so I don't ever want to start just be like, okay, let's forget that all these things are going on. And the reason, I think it's important to acknowledge, because I think it's I don't think it is tough, and I could not imagine what it's like to be there. And so yeah, it's I wish I had it. It's in my newsletter and on my blog. If you go to latoyacollinsjones.com, at the very top of it, it actually it talks about, there's an article by the Bazaar, and the Bazaar is showing exactly what you can do. Like, if you're not sure how to take action, how to help. It's a list of all the organizations who are helping people right now in the region. And so it's, all different types of causes. And so I would just encourage you, if you get a chance, to check it. I may even try to drop it here in the chat for you all, just so that you have it. But, I, thoughts and prayers are important, but action is better. And so I'm going to put this in here just as a way to share, because I do think it's important. And so you can go in, and in the article, it talks about the Alliance for Middle East Peace. So there's a large network of peace builders. There's the Carter Center, the UN, the Red Cross, the Doctors Without Borders, International MedCorps, Save the Children, Direct Relief, International Rescue Committee. So there's all these organizations they've curated to be able to help. And so actually, one of the things that I wanted to really move into, as we think about this, this time, and taking a moment to stop, is it actually flowed into one of the questions that we had, which was, I'm going to kind of maneuver it, or I guess massage it, if you will, to kind of for today. But one of the questions that was asked was, how can leaders effectively manage risk and uncertainty during periods of change? And I'm actually going to say, not just how can managers effectively manage risk or uncertainty during periods of change, but also I would say during just difficult periods in general, right? And the reason why I think this question is really important are for a couple of things, or a couple of reasons. Um, as leaders, you know, whether we want to or not, people are looking up to us in some shape, form, or fashion. And so, pausing, having the ability to pause is a privilege many people can't take. Having a privilege to pause is a privilege that not a lot of people can take. And so, as a result of that, if you are leading and you're a leader in the organization, I think in order to help manage risk and uncertainty and all of these things that are happening inside your organization, or in this situation, even out, how do you do it? How do you effectively handle that? How do you effectively manage it? Well, I think one of the very first things that you can do is I like to just put it out there. Put it out there. This is also probably what I see a lot of leaders actually struggle with. Because when you just put it out there, it puts you in a place or a point of what I'd like to say is vulnerability. Um, and I think with that place or space of vulnerability as a leader, you're like, hey, I don't know how this is going to resonate. I don't know what this looks like as a as I am trying to lead people through uncertainty, through change, through risk, through things that are happening outside the four walls. I don't know what to do. And so when we're kind of putting it out there, it can leave you feeling vulnerable. But I also think as a leader, vulnerability, when done responsibly, is a superpower of excellent leaders. Now, there's a balance, if you will, of it as well, right? So when you're a leader and you're working towards vulnerability, or you're trying to figure that out, and you're leading through these uncertain times internally or externally, external forces, right? Calling things as they are, in a way that leads with humanity, that leads with empathy and understanding. Those are the ways that I think that really strengthen a team, right? And so as you're going in and saying, hey, I don't know what this looks like, but I just want to check in. I know that I'm having some problems. Like, this has been really hard for me because of XYZ. This is what I've done. Does anyone want to share? Right? Um, it's a good opportunity to open the door. And if we're not careful as leaders, what you don't want to do is just continue. The world's been piling on. Like, let's be honest. I'd say even since COVID, right? You know, COVID, the murder of George Floyd, like, all of these things are happening. And when you look at all of these, it all has an impact. And so our opportunity as leaders is to understand, recognize, and honestly, sometimes we may not even understand. So I take that back. But it is to acknowledge, it is to be empathetic, it is to advocate where needed so that our teams are taken care of in that sense. And so as leaders, when we go back to this question, how can leaders effectively manage risk and uncertainty during periods of change, or anything? I'll put anything there, not just periods of change. I think it's acknowledging where you are. I think a lot of times the other thing that really helps is having a clear path forward. And the clear path forward doesn't always even mean that you have all the answers, right? Clear path forward may even mean that I've got a clear path forward, um, but not but, I have a clear path forward and I'm still figuring out some of the details. Here's what I know so far. Those are the little things that become oxygen for your team. When you're dealing with uncertainty, when you're dealing with risk, especially depending on how resilient your team is. How resilient your team is, how resilient the people on your team are. It can be difficult, and so by figuring it out, leaving them in limbo is never the answer. Ever the answer. The opportunity comes as leaders is, here's where we are, here's what's happening, here's the plan. And this is what I know so far based on where the plan is going, or how I've designed the plan, or what the plan is. Sometimes the plan is coming from up top, right? And I'm still working on the details. And what I found is when I'm able to do that, when I was able to do this as a leader or coach leaders into doing this, what you see is you see your team go, because uncertainty is maddening, right? I'll give you a good, Brene Brown talks about this in a way that I think is really eloquent. And one of the biggest things she talks about is we are all wired to tell stories, right? We're all wired to tell stories. And so if you don't fill in the blanks for your team during these times, they're going to fill them in for themselves. And I think that becomes one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle in terms of like what we're doing as leaders to be able to really help people go through change, adversity, whatever that thing is. That's kind of where it is and where it resides. So that's what I would say in terms of that. Also, if you're watching, once again, thank you for hopping in. Thank you for watching. I just want to encourage you, hop into the chat if you have questions. I love to answer questions live. I have a set of questions that are typically submitted or questions that I'm often getting. I'll come in and I'll put those up, and those are pre-wired, but I am always looking forward to questions, and I'll be able to answer those live as well. That's the goal, is for you all to be able to ask me anything. All right. So thank you once again for joining. So we're going to move into the next question. So when we think about this next question, as I'm pulling it up, we talk about effectively managing risk and uncertainty and change and outside things that are happening. What does that look like for us as leaders and how we effectively manage it? We talked about number one, go back, call it what it is, say what it is. Give the level of details in which you are capable or able or allowed to give so that there's a clear path forward. And even if that path is not crystal clear, they at least know where they are and where they stand. Y'all, it's Prime Day. I may have to get a new mic because if y'all saw this situation struggling over here. All right. So the reason why, so I think this question is really good, and it goes actually into the next question, which is, what are some practical ways to support employees' mental health and well-being in the workplace? I'm going to say that again. So what are some practical ways to support employees' mental health and well-being in the workplace? I think there's multiple ways that you can do this. One of the more practical ways that you can do this as a leader is, number one, check in. Check in. The number one way that you can support employees' mental health and well-being in the workplace is check in, and check in regularly. And when I think about checking in, it's not just in one-on-ones. There have been plenty of times, I like to call them drive-bys. When we were in the office, when you're in the office, maybe if you're in the office a little bit more, it may be stopping by. It may be saying, hey, do you want to grab a quick coffee? Sometimes I used to block out the end of my day. And so if I blocked out the end of my day, I would be able to go in and hop in and say, hey, what's going on? I just wanted to check in. How are things going? How is that project? Is everything okay? I just want to make sure you're good. Right. So that's one way that you can come in and really help as far as advocating. So asking them how they're doing, employees' mental health and well-being in the workplace, right? Number one, check in, ask them how they're doing. Another piece of the puzzle that I think that I've seen done exceptionally well is figure out who your EAP people are. And a lot of times people don't know this, but EAP, when I was at Dell, this was actually really good. The EAP that we had was Lyra. Lyra was amazing. And they actually had people who were partnered with us, and they would come in and speak, right? You could invite them into your team meetings, and they would talk about their services. They would talk about what you have access to. I think that that's important. Even if you can't get your EAP provider in, having HR come in and say, hey, these are some things here's some tactics, here's some things that you have, here's what you have access to. I think sometimes people don't even know. And so one of the ways that you can do this Um, I think as far as supporting mental health and well-being is also advocating for people leveraging their benefits, their EAP. If you all have coaching services, whatever that looks like, I think that that's another way to see that leverage. And how I've been able to do that. I'll tell you another really good practical one that I started instituting. And I don't do it every team meeting because I had a very chatty had a very chatty team. If any of you guys are watching, I miss y'all, but like definitely one. But I would say that we would call them either like 2-word check-ins, 5-word check-ins, 3-word check-ins. And so what I would do is at the start of a team meeting, I said, all right, team, if we didn't have a full agenda, I'll do 5 days, right? Excuse me, 5 words. If we had a really tight team agenda and I knew it was going to be long, I would say, hey, team, we're going to do a 2-word check-in or a 3-word check-in. And so typically, because I feel like we did a really good job at fostering an openness within the team, those 2-word check-ins would be really good ways for me to get a pulse on the team, right? And so my team meetings were the beginning. They were closer to the beginning of the week, Tuesday mornings, and so I was able to kind of get a gauge really early in the week where people were. So if we're doing a 2-word check-in, I may have somebody say, I am stuffy and tired, or I am excited and busy. I am overwhelmed and frustrated, right? Like you get any range of them, right? We get any range of all of these things. And so what I would do as a leader, it's important as you're doing these check-ins is I'm taking mental note of who I probably need to check in more that day or that week just to figure out what's going on, right? So if that person says, "Hey, I'm stuffy and I'm tired." "Hey, Bob, what's going on?" I've just got allergies and I'm not feeling well." "Okay, like how are things going? Like, do you need to take the day off, right? Like, will you be able to like, oh, I can push through. Okay, I just want to, so right. I just want to let you know it's okay if you need time. Like all of these things become important. And so one of the other, I would say, one of the other gems I would give you as a leader is I'm not always waiting for them to advocate for their own mental health and well-being. I'm actively advocating too, right? As a leader, I'm actively advocating for their mental health and well-being as well. It's imperative that we do that as leaders because sometimes what I find is, sorry, I was closing out a window there. Have some things eating up some bandwidth for the call. There we go. But what I would find with teams and with leaders is, depending on who their previous leader was, what their previous work experiences were, people sometimes are not as proactive or they're comfortable sharing, hey, like I'm having a couple things, they're going on, there's a little off, I'm having a rough day, right? All of these pieces of the puzzle. And so by me going and doing like 2-word check-in, 3-word check-ins, 5-word check-ins, just random drive-bys via Teams or in person, what this allowed was to open the door to continue the dialogue so that I'm helping them learn to also advocate for themselves. Um, and learn to advocate without fear of penalty. Because all of this is important. Because if you have a team that's not healthy, if you have a team that's not burned out, if you think about even just selfishly from a performance standpoint, although I believe people first and always, that's my motto. But we also are required to do a job and perform. If they're not healthy, they're not performing, right? And there are people who can perform well, even in duress and under duress. But I think that, how do you get to a point where you have a team that's healthy, that's whole, that's able to advocate and figure it out? So That's what I think about when we think about what are some practical ways to support employees with mental health. Number one, check-ins, regular check-ins, right? Get creative with those check-ins. Are they team meeting check-ins? Are they, what I call drive-bys, like via Teams, via stop-bys? Like that's like all of those check-ins, just regular check-ins. And then number two, as far as how can you help support employees' mental health and well-being in the workplace, the other piece is find other advocates outside of your organization. Will your EAPs come in and speak? Do they have teams to come and talk about that? Do you have HR or your people office, whoever that is, come and talk about what people actually have access to and what their services are, so that they're better educated on also how to advocate for themselves. That's how I would do that. Like I said, hey y'all, once again, thank you for joining. Drop in, say, hey, how are you doing? I hope that you all are enjoying this. You're a little quiet today, but I'm okay with that. It means, I tell people all the time, usually when the crowd is quiet, two things are happening. Either I'm crushing it or it's slowly dying, but either way, I'll take it. So that's what I would think about when we think about in terms of how to help advocate for mental health and well-being as leaders. So our next question. Oh, this one's a good one. All right. So what role does self-awareness play in effective leadership, and how can leaders develop it? What roles do self-awareness play in effective leadership, and how can leaders develop it? Woo. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to clap, y'all. This is a good one. And this is not just for leaders. I also think this is for up and coming leaders as well. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. So what does self-awareness, like what role does self-awareness play? So I'm going to break this down. I got to do like part one, part two. I get excited when we talk about this. What role does self-awareness play in effective leadership? Number one, if you are not self-aware, I would question if you are a good leader. If you are not self-aware, I would question whether you are even an effective and good leader. Self-awareness is wildly imperative as a leader. To be effective in leadership, if you do not know yourself, you are potentially a detriment to your team. Now, knowing yourself and self-awareness, I'm going to use me as an example. I'm going to use myself. Okay? Number one, part one, self-awareness, right? Self-awareness. I do not like email. It is probably the one mode of communication that I should be like, nah, I'm good. Like me and email be struggling. And so because I'm self-aware about that, I was like, yo, if I'm in a meeting, my team knows, hey, y'all, if y'all need something, email for me is I need to know, right? It's good for me to know. Or like, FYI, don't need any action. Everything's good. Get to it when you can. If the house is on fire and you need something now, you need to ping me. Period. Point blank. That's self-awareness. That's what I know for me as a leader. Also, I had a ton of things going on, especially in the D&I space. A lot was always happening, and it's not even bad, but it's just the world. The world is turning all the time in the space of D&I. And so as a result of that, I also know that every now and then I may need a reminder, and I'm okay with that because I'm self-aware that like sometimes things I forget, and I'm like well-intentioned. And so if I had somebody like, hey, did you see this? I'm self-aware enough to know that that could happen, and I'm not frustrated or I'm not offended or I push back, right? Self-awareness is key. Also, how you work, not just with email and communication styles, but if you are a person who likes to work on stuff and then work on stuff, or have a meeting about the meeting about the meeting about the meeting, being self-aware and honest and open about that makes a difference, because it allows for your team to better gauge and prepare themselves when they're even bringing things to you or they're having to push things out. Each one of those things work. But if you are not self-aware as a leader, you cannot communicate your expectations effectively. If you're not self-aware as a leader, you cannot communicate your expectations effectively. It's so, so, so important, right? So, as a leader, know yourself. Now, get to the second half of this question. How can leaders develop this? How can leaders develop self awareness? Well, there's a couple of things. And also, thanks to you all for watching. If you have any questions, make sure you drop them in the chat. I want to be able to answer any questions. Maybe I just picked a good set of questions today. You guys are just taking it all in. But I want to make sure that if you have any questions, feel free to ask. That's the purpose of this. This is not just me coming in and talking, although I can do that. My hope is that I can answer your questions real time and go from there. All right, so how do you develop self-awareness as a leader? How do you develop self-awareness in general? I'm about to blow your minds. Buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to tell you right out the gate. This is how you develop self-awareness. Come in close. Ask for feedback. Ask for feedback. You know you, but people don't always experience you how you think they experience you. Asking for feedback is a great way to develop self-awareness, right? In my opinion, I think like asking for feedback is like top of my list, because it is how people are experiencing you. And although sometimes it's not our intent, although sometimes it is, we have the best intentions, or we think we're doing the right thing and our heart is in the right place and we're missing the mark. If you don't ask for feedback, that is one of the number one ways you're going to be running around in these streets unaware. Find me a leader who's not self-aware. I'll tell you a leader who's eventually not going to do well. Or if you have a leader who is self-aware of some of their tendencies and not even choosing to work on those things, high performers won't stay. If you're a leader and you're not self-aware, or you're struggling, or I like to call it, you put your earmuffs on and you're not trying to hear it, those are sure shot ways right there to have your team will just shut you off. You won't be effective. Lack of self-awareness equals non-effective leadership. Another way that I like to, at least for me, one of the ways that I actually become more self-aware, oddly, is through learning. And being very voracious about my appetite for learning. That could be books. That could be, there's a lot of self-assessments. I don't think all self-assessments are good. Like they're not like, you don't treat them as like gospel, as like the thing, but DISC assessment is really good. ENFP, like I'm an ENFP, so Myers-Briggs sometimes can give you some insights and awareness. We did a thing called 5 Dynamics, which I'm actually a huge fan of. I'm not even like saying one way or another, but I'm a really big fan of that company, because 5 Dynamics actually, it's not a personality test. It's actually, I guess, the best way to explain it, it's not a personality test, but it does talk about how you work and where your pieces of the puzzle are, right? So are you an explorer? Are you, do you execute well? Do you question well? I can't remember the other 2, but there were kind of like 4 pockets. And what's really excite, that's what it is. Excite, explore, examine, execute. I remembered. I pulled that from way back yonder. And so you have people who are high excite, or you have people who explore a lot, and then you have your examine, which are the people who like to ask a lot of questions, and then you have your execute. And then there's varying degrees in which you could do these things. This is probably actually one of my favorite assessments as a leader. So if you have all of these, right? So what happens is, as you're building your team, what you don't want is a team full of people who excite. Because typically people who are high excite are low execute. And for the most part, you don't find most people are typically most people have like two that they operate in very naturally, low effort because it's very easy for them, one or two. And then there are some other ones that it's not that they can't do it, but it takes more effort, right? And then every now and then you can get somebody who kind of comes in is able to do all three. So I'll actually share mine. So when we did the assessment, I was effortless and excite, explore, and examine. And then when it got to execute, that's the one that actually requires high energy for me. I'm a visionary, right? And so one of the things that it said in that assessment was you can see the forest through the trees. No, you can see the forest and the trees, which is a very rare thing, right? So I can actually see the vision and I can see the details, but don't ask me to chop the trees down. That's kind of the easiest way to explain it. So I think self-awareness, you can come through it from these assessments, and there's tons of them. You can do, what's the other one? Gallup Strength Finders is another one. If you get the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book, there's an assessment in there. So if you are not self-aware as a leader, it's because you're not trying. And I'm going to take a sip of my coffee on that. If you're not self-aware as a leader, you're not trying. It is imperative that you are self-aware. Remember what I said, lack of self-awareness equals non-effective leadership. All right. Loving it. So I still don't have any questions from the audience, but once again, thank you all for joining me. I hope that you are getting nuggets from this wherever you are as part of your career. If you are an aspiring leader and you want to be into leadership, I hope that you're able to take all of this in. If you are a leader, I hope this is beneficial for you as well. Okay, so we got another question. Oh, actually, this is perfect. It kind of goes flows into what we just talked about. So the next question is, what are some strategies for promoting open communication and feedback within a team or an organization? Ooh. What are some strategies for promoting open communication and feedback within a team or an organization? Now, this one, let's dive in. Let's dive in. I'm just gonna go head first. We're just gonna dive right in. So one of the number one strategies I think for promoting open communication and feedback within your team or organization is that you have to have the culture for it. You have to have the culture for it. If you have not cultivated a culture for open communication and feedback, there's not a strategy I could come up with that could help you. Not one. Because what will happen is if you have not cultivated the culture for it, you can ask for open communication and ask for feedback, and people are going to tell you what you want to hear. People are going to tell you what you want to hear. So, the very first question, I guess, even I would say the very first strategy for promoting open communication and feedback within a team is cultivate the culture for it. You have to cultivate the culture, because if you do not, then it doesn't matter what else you do from there. Right? That culture. So let's take it a step further. What does a good culture that is cultivated? What does cultivating a good culture for open communication and feedback look like? Well, number one, it's regular feedback. We just talked about that. Do you have a feedback loop? Do you have a feedback loop? And through all of your life cycles, do you have a feedback loop not just for your customers? Do you have a feedback loop for your leadership? Do you have do you have a feedback loop, um, I'd say bottom up and top down, right? And how you handle the feedback also will be a strategy for promoting open communication and feedback. This is probably this is I would say this is a real stumbling block for a lot of organizations and or teams. Okay. In order to promote open communication and feedback, you have to be willing to agree to disagree. You have to be willing to ask it and be okay with the feedback. Because here's the thing, open communication and feedback doesn't mean we have to agree on everything. Especially depending on where you sit in an organization, you're not always going to get what you want, right? Individual contributors may have communication and feedback. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get everything that they're asking for. But how you treat it will determine the future of whether you can continue that path. Because if you break that trust in how you respond in the feedback in the open communication, that right there will determine everything else down the line. Because sometimes, actually, I'm getting excited. Okay, calm down. If your house is always on fire at work, and you're like, man, I didn't know this. Man, I didn't know this. Man, I didn't know this. Oh my God, this is happening. Your feedback loop is broken. It's broken. You've got to figure this out. Because what's either happening is your team is figuring things out for themselves and then the house is on fire, right? Or they don't know when and where or how to come back to you. Or you're not approachable. Or they could have seen how communication and feedback was handled previously and you lack trust. They lack trust. They don't trust. I've seen it time and time again. Here's one. Sorry, I just got tongue tied. It's very easy for organizations to want to clean up the narrative. I said it. Very, very easy. It's very easy for organizations and even leaders to fall into the trap of feeling the need to clean up a narrative. You don't have to clean the narrative is the narrative. If what the feedback is saying is this, and then we want to sometimes massage it so that we can feel better about the feedback, we are doing a disservice to our team. We are doing a disservice to our organizations as a whole, and you're not progressing forward. And so it's really important that as you're going in and you have the open conversations and communication and the feedback, that you are not massaging the narrative to fit what you want to say or do. Be less selfish. That's important, because if you find yourself trying to alter the narrative from open communication and feedback, your team is aware, and the more that you do it, the less trust they have. And the less the trust that they have in you, that just doesn't mean they're not going to come to you when they need to. It also means they probably won't stay. If they can afford to leave, they will leave. And it's not even if, it's when they can afford to leave, they'll leave. So it's important that you cultivate a culture, because there's not a strategy that's going to work if you haven't even done the work. Right? That's like asking look, I love talking about analogies. Asking for a strategy on how to promote open communication and feedback on a team or organization is like asking how do I plant a garden and for it to grow, right? Well, my question is the soil ready to receive the seeds? I don't have like the super green thumb, But I know enough to know you have to cultivate the land. You've got to water it. The soil has to be nutrient rich. You've got to till the land. You've got to turn over the dirt. All of these things have to happen in order for something to be planted and to actually get what it is that you get out of it, like the plants, right? Or the flowers, whichever one it is. But if you haven't cultivated the land, it ain't gonna happen, baby. So that's what I would say about that one. Great question. I'm pretty sure there's more strategies that I'll come up with, but cultivating the culture for open feedback and open communication and feedback is like priority number one as a strategy. And you should probably, how do you know that you even have the culture? Ask the question. Ask the question. And then don't massage the narrative. Take it for what it is and take action, right? When you're getting feedback as an organization, sorry, I'm really passionate about this. When you're getting feedback as an organization, it is so important. What would happen if you didn't try to explain away the feedback that you got, but you actually simply responded and moved forward with solutions to move you towards that? Whether that feedback or open communication is how to make things better for your customers, how to make things better for your leaders, how to make things better for your team members, how to make things better for your stakeholders. If it is something that is people are taking the time and there's a theme that comes up, figure out how to move forward with it. Don't try to figure out how to massage the narrative so that it's not what it is. Imagine if we actually treated it as such and we actually evaluated it, thought about it. Maybe we agree, maybe we don't. Maybe the data says that it does, maybe the data says that it doesn't. And then we respond accordingly. You will have way more trust and build more trust in the organization than you could possibly imagine. All right. Man, quiet today. No questions. We're about to get through this whole hour, and I've not gotten a question this week. This is interesting. We'll see next week. All right. Last question. Oh man. Okay. This question is gonna have to be a maybe like a part 2 next week. Because I could probably talk almost an entire hour about this alone. Because I'm a technologist at heart. How can leaders embrace technology and digital transformation to drive innovation within their industry or within, I'd even say probably even within their organization? How can leaders embrace technology and digital transformation to drive innovation within their industry? How can you embrace technology and digital transformation? Here's the thing. I don't even know if it's about embracing, but like more or less it's about you've got to accept it. Like part of embracing is accepting. If you don't accept the fact that technology and digital transformation is a necessity for innovation, is a necessity for performance and productivity, then you're already behind a ball. As a leader, I don't think you have a choice on whether you embrace technology and digital transformation. The organizations, the teams, the industries that are going to figure this out faster are going to be the ones who are willing to embrace it and lean in and not run from. So as leaders, one of the things that I actually talked about this back in April. Microsoft invited me on a panel at this event called Culturati. It's an amazing organization, amazing event, and we talked about this. And so one of the things that I shared was I love to use Fridays as playtime as a leader. And so what I would do is typically on Fridays, I don't have any meetings. It was a catch-up day, but I would often spend that time looking at, okay, what tools do we have? Is there a training I can look into? And mind you, I'm a technologist at heart. how can I get more proficient? How can I share with my team um, what's a tool or a trick or something that can also help them move more efficiently through their day? Because technology and digital transformation is just not all about the bells and the whistles. The thing about technology and digital transformation is this: um the less time I spend on tasks or things that pull mental bandwidth from me, that I would say are not my core work, low level work, that's less that I have to actually go operate in my genius, right? So as leaders, it's important for us to embrace technology and digital transformation, is because your team will be more efficient. As they're more efficient, they're operating at their highest levels. And so then at that point, they're spending more time like on the innovation side, on the creative side. What does that look like? And so part of the things that you can do as a leader in embracing technology and digital transformation, depending on where you sit in an org and capacity and time, I think it's important to understand what technology you have in your organization. Where is your team gapped? How can you bring them up to speed? Because if your team isn't up to speed, it becomes even more difficult, even if you are, right? And so I think if we think of it as less of a, as leaders, if we think of it as less as a hassle and more as a necessity and a helper, then I think that is really where we can get to the second part of that, which is driving innovation, right? Because if we are pushing against technology, at this point it would just be insane to do it. But like, say for instance, you're unsure of how to actually move through that or operate through that, um, I think you're going to be left behind. And we even talked about this. I'm part of um, a group of entrepreneurs, and we get together. Like, he does this thing once a month. He's Chris. He's an amazing automation guru. And we're all talking about AI, right? And AI, generative AI, is becoming more and more a part of our lives, and people are terrified of it and not sure about it. And it's going to be iRobot and Terminator, and they're going to take our jobs. And I said this: I think the differentiating factor between who will be able to compete 5 years from now is going to be the group that knows and understands AI and actually how to leverage it to your advantage. And how do you start to work smarter and not harder? I'll give you a great example. I actually had ChatGPT write out topically my news, like what my newsletters could be from last week, from October all the way through the end of the year. All the way through the end of the year. Hey, they were like, hey, can you take into consideration like holidays and all this other stuff? And it spit it out. And I said, hey, I'd love to see more detail, like on where these things can go. And I'm not cheating. I'm saving my bandwidth, because now I'm not starting at zero. And that's where it is. Like, we've got to start to look at technology and the digital transformation as a means of getting us from point A to point B, or even point B to point C, because we did the early legwork. And how can I free up like time, mental bandwidth, and capacity to operate at my highest level? And I'll use this example because I know we're getting close to time. I'll use this example. So I remember at the event, there was a lady. She had a question. She's a lawyer, and she said, well, I don't know about AI, like spitting out these things, because I think it's important for lawyers to learn how to write this first draft, or whatever she said, right? And my question back to her was, does a lawyer need to know how to write a first draft, or do they need to know or understand what a good first draft looks like? Which is more important? They need to know and understand what a good first draft looks like to get from point A to point B. Actually sitting down and typing it manually is a waste of time. And so I think technology and digital transformation is going to start to be a little bit more difficult for organizations who bill by the hour. Because probably I'm not saying that's the practice of that organization, but I am saying that lawyer probably gets paid to write up the first draft, right? And so what does this actually look like? And so how can you actually, I think embracing technology and digital transformation is going to be a means of, if you think about your organization and the work you do with purpose and meaning and impact, it allows for us to continue to operate in purpose with meaning, with a driving a greater impact for good, like for whatever it is that we're doing. And that's why I think it's important for leaders to embrace technology and digital transformation. I'll end with this in this last episode. So I was watching a Gary Vee video, and one of the things he said was, a lot of people don't even really understand AI. Spend 20 hours between now and the end of the year just reading and learning about AI. And then start to draw your conclusions. Get out of the headlines of what technology and the digital transformation looks like, and actually just go make yourself a student and learn. And I thought that that was really good. And then I challenged a colleague last week. I said, here's my other challenge for you is before you Google it, use AI. Before you Google something, go drop it in Chat GPT and ask a question and see. And so the more that you start to utilize it, the better you start to understand what its capabilities are, and not necessarily running from what we think it is. It is not going to replace everybody's jobs tomorrow. Is it going to? Let's be honest. Let's keep it 100. Is it going to replace some things now that are redundant and repetitive? Absolutely. I'm not even going to pretend like it's not. But it's not going to be able to replace everything and all people all at once. I think we will be long gone on to glory if and when that ever happens, right? So it's just something to think about in terms of that. As leaders, it's important that we embrace technology and digital transformation, especially because it drives innovation, but it also allows you to be efficient. It allows you to be productive. It allows you to continue to help you and your team operate in your area of genius, in your zone of genius. And that's where the magic happens day to day. That's where you get the teams that are energized and actually producing and performing high performing teams. High performing teams are going to be sitting there. So that's all I have for you today. Look, thank you all for joining. I know you guys are quiet today, but I'll take it. I'm glad. I hope that you enjoyed this. Drop comments. Make sure you share all of those things. But it's been a great time. I'll see you next week. Don't forget AMA with LCJ. It's a live podcast talking about leadership and culture, DEI, high performing teams, and how we can all go together. You guys are more than welcome to join me in this journey by asking questions live. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate the feedback. And I'll see you next Tuesday at 2. See ya.